Hello, friends. If this joke tickled your funny bone, don't forget to hit subscribe. It's an easy way to keep the humor flowing into your feed. Don't miss the last one. That is special joke for you.
A soldier's wife has just returned from her insurance provider and is looking very unhappy. "What's the matter?" her friend asked. "I went to get my husband covered privately, but the fine print stated no payouts when the holder dies as a result of an explosion and/or from injuries sustained in an explosion," she replied. "Oh, so why would that make you unhappy?" her friend asked. "Well, it's too late to stop the freaking timer now. It's a prisoner's first day, and he goes to lunch. As he's sitting there, someone jumps up and yells 46. The whole room erupts in laughter. A few minutes later, someone else yells 85. Again, the whole room erupts in laughter. This goes on several more times. Finally, the new prisoner elbows the old guy next to him. "Hey, what's going on?" "The prison library only has one joke book," the old-timer replies. "Everyone's read it. In fact, we've all read it so many times that we've numbered them. Whenever someone wants to tell a joke, they yell the number and we remember it." The new guy wants to make a good impression, so he decides to give it a try. He jumps up and yells, 23. Dead silence. 23, he tries again. Still, the hall is absolutely silent. He sits back down, ashamed, and elbows the old-timer again. "Why didn't it work for me?" "Well," the old-timer answers, "some people can tell 'em and some can't." There is a story about a monastery in Europe perched high on a cliff several hundred feet in the air. The only way to reach the monastery was to be suspended in a basket, which was pulled to the top by several monks who pulled and tugged with all their strength. Obviously, the ride up the steep cliff in that basket was terrifying. One tourist got exceedingly nervous about halfway up as he noticed that the rope by which he was suspended was old and frayed. With a trembling voice, he asked the monk who was riding with him in the basket how often they changed the rope. The monk thought for a moment and answered brusquely, "Whenever it breaks." This man was talking to himself. "I wish I could meet some really important people before I die." A man walked up to him and said, "Hi, my name is Mike and I overheard you. I can help you because I know everybody on the planet who is alive today." "No way. You must be pulling my leg. Let's go to Jane Hull so you can prove it to me," said the man. So they go to Jane Hull's office, and when she notices Mike, they start to talk about how they were in kindergarten together. "Okay, it could have been a coincidence that you were in kindergarten together. Let's go talk to the president," said the man. So they took a jet to the White House, where the president was having a press conference. When the president saw Mike, they started to talk about how they were in band together. "Okay, for your last test, let's go to the Pope," said the man. So they took a jet to Rome, and when they got there, they went to a church where the Pope was giving a sermon. After the sermon, Mike walked up to the Pope, and they shook hands and started to talk. When Mike walked back over to the man said, "You know, I had a hard time believing you even after the Pope until a guy came up to me and said, 'Hey, who is that standing next to Mike?'" Guy's driving down the road in his new Lamborghini. Stops at a light next to an old man on a moped. The old man looks over and says, "Say, that's a pretty spiffy-looking car there, son." "It looks fast," Guy says. "It sure is." The old man looks at the interior and says, "Looks luxurious inside, too," and leans back. Just then, the light changes, and the guy says, "Later, old-timer," and decides to show him how fast the car really is. He floors it and starts doing 110 on the highway, leaving town. He notices a dot in his rear mirror, and it's getting closer. What could be faster than his new Lamborghini? Whoosh! Something flies by, passing him, and it was so blurred it's hard to be sure, but it looked like the old guy on that moped. Now something is approaching from the front, getting closer. Whoosh! Something streaks by him going the other way, and it was the old man on the moped. Dot in the rear-view mirror, and here comes the old man on the moped from behind, gaining, and bam! He hits the back of the Lamborghini. Guy brakes to a halt, runs behind the car, and there's the old man and the moped, both showing the effects of the crash. Guy says, "Old man, I don't know how you did it, but that moped is the fastest thing I've ever seen." "But you're in bad shape. Do you want an ambulance? Is there anything I can do for you?" And the old man whispers, "Yes. Unhook my suspenders from your side mirror." Tired of his parents' incessant harangue, a very lazy young man went fishing to add some fish to their menu. While sitting for fishing, he felt very sleepy and was yawning. An old-timer saw his lackadaisical approach and poked him, "Son, why are you working so hard? Just go to home and take a nap. It won't be hard for you, I guess." The young man replied, "No, I have to catch some fish, but it seems very hard to catch one. It would be better if fishesh came to busket of their own." The old man laughed and said, "It won't be possible for sure, but you can just marry a girl and then make her pregnant. She will give you a child. You can then devolve this duty to that child and enjoy free time." The young man seemed a bit interested. Yawning again, he asked the old man, "It is a good idea. I should have thought about that. Do you know any pregnant girl?" An old man is fishing by the creek. Soon a wagon pulled by horses approaches on the road behind him. "Is the water shallow enough to pass through with my horses and goods, old man?" bellowed the driver. "Sure. Mere few feet to the right, a small family made their way across not an hour ago," meekly said the old-timer. Happy to shorten his journey, the driver reins his horses across the stream. Not a few steps in when the horses succumbed to the watery depth. Barely holding on to the bank, the driver escaped the waters with his life intact while the horses drowned. "Oh, you old fart, you said I could make my way across here. Did you tell me that a small family made it across?" The old man was puzzled. "I don't get it. The family of ducks passed, and their legs were much shorter than the ones in your horses. There was this guy working at McDonald's, and it was his turn to cook the French fries. So he put the frozen fries in the metal basket and dipped them in the oil. You see, this guy was a veteran chef and used to be able to sense when food was cooked by looking at its color or by smelling it. He never needed a timer or a meat thermometer or anything to help him, and so he just stared at the fries, looking at their color as they turned from white to yellow, compensating for the fact that the oil was too yellow. Everyone was usually in awe of him because his fries were always perfectly crispy, and many customers came flocking to this particular McDonald's just for his fries. However, today, out of the corner of his eyes, he spied the newest Happy Meal toy, the talking electric Pikachu, licensed by Nintendo. As an avid Pokemon fan, he couldn't help but pick up the toy and pull down on the tail marked with the down arrow. "Pikachu!" it went. Delighted, he pulled on the lightning bolt-shaped tail again. "Paka-pika-pai!" Absolutely thrilled he was at the possible variations of voice recordings the little rodent could provide, he pulled at the tail another 30 more times. "Paka!" It went Pikachu! And so on until he counted that there were 15 in all. Suddenly he received a tap on his shoulder. He turned only to face his supervisor holding a metal basket full of blackened fries. No human is infallible. As much experience as you have in the culinary arts, you must never be so complacent nor arrogant in your abilities. There are tools of this trade that you can make use of that will help you perform effectively. You have neglected one of the fundamental precepts of our trade. I do not wish to have to say it, or I would be doubly disappointed in you. You do know what I'm speaking of, do you not? The chef hung his head low and ashamedly remained quiet, pondering over his obvious mistake, one that he had never imagined he would ever make. Tell me, demanded his supervisor. The kitchen grew quiet as the crew stopped their activities, turning to both of them just to hear the age-old adage, "Time flies when you're having fun." Two old seniors are sitting on a bench outside a nursing home. They both take sips of their drinks, rocking back and forth slowly. One looks at the other and asks, "How's your weekend been, George?" George looks at him. "It's been amazing. I was taking a walk down the street, and I come to a railroad crossing. Lo and behold, a girl was tied up on the tracks just like in the movies." The other old-timer looked over in shock. "No way! You're kidding!" George put his hands up. "I swear it's true. So I rescued her, obviously. I took her home, and we made love under the stars. 17 times I counted." "That must have been the best night of your life." George nodded. "It most definitely was." He paused and took a sip of his drink. "Only problem was I couldn't find her head." Three vampires are in a castle in Transylvania discussing how strong and powerful they are. The youngest of the group slams his fist on the table and exclaims, "I'm the fastest out of us three! Watch this!" He bursts out the window, transforming into a bat, and flies towards a small village. 2 minutes later, he returns with his face covered in blood. "What happened?" the other two vampires ask. "You know that village by the woods?" the youngest vampire explained. "I flew down there, killed and drank the blood of an entire family, and flew back here before they even knew what hit them." "Very impressive," shouted the second vampire. "But you're 1,000 years too young to be faster than I," and he burst through the same window as the first, headed to the village. 1 minute later, the second vampire returned to the room through the window, his face a mask of blood. "What happened?" exclaimed the other two vampires. "That same village you went to? Many villagers gathered around the house you attacked to see what had happened. I managed to kill and drink the blood of 5 whole families and get back here before they even knew what hit them." "Very impressive," said the eldest vampire quietly. "But you are also 1,000 years too young to be faster than I. I am the strongest and fastest vampire alive." And in a flash, the eldest vampire was through the window. 15 seconds later, the oldest returned to the room, his face drenched in blood. "What happened?" exclaimed the other two vampires. "Did you see that tree the villagers planted years ago at the front of their village?" "Of course," said the other two vampires. "Well, I did not. A large and powerful kingdom conquered their wealthy neighbor only to discover its treasure was all hidden away. Only the count from the conquered kingdom knew where the gold was hidden, but he refused to tell. The conquerors took him to the dungeon, placed his head on the chopping block, and told him, 'This is your last chance. Tell us where the gold is, or off comes your head.' Beads of sweat slithered down the count's face, but still he said nothing. The captain gave the signal, and the executioner brought his hatchet down, but just as he did, the count's courage broke, and he blurted out, 'No! Wait! I'll tell you where gold's hid.' But it was too late. The axe came down, off came the head, and no one got the gold. The moral of the story is, don't hatchet your count before he chickens. We got a young puppy at the moment, and myself and my wife usually get up at the same time early each morning to sort her out. As she hasn't seen us for a few hours as she sleeps downstairs with cats, she gets excited and clingy first thing, so one of us will pander to her while other will make coffee, etc. This morning my wife woke us both up, and I went to sleep half asleep and bleary-eyed. When I got downstairs, she was there, ready with the tongue lashing, stating she was being held up because I was in the bathroom. Without thinking, I said, "Sorry about that. I didn't expect you to use your broomstick to get downstairs so fast." Apparently, it made her giggle most of the day, but she didn't admit it until this evening. A retired banker went to a psychiatrist. He said, "For 30 years I worked in a bank as a teller. Every day I would serve dozens of customers. I loved my job and never missed a day. Last month, I retired. Since then, every time I pass a bank, I have a huge craving to enter and take out money. Even if I pass an ATM, I have to stop and take some cash out. I've got thousands of dollars in cash at home, yet every day I feel desperate to go to the bank and take out more. What's wrong with me? The psychiatrist replied, It sounds like you're having withdrawal symptoms. A 55-year-old lady suddenly started learning to swim instead of her usual routine of going to the temple. Everyone was curious and asked her, Why the change in your interest in swimming these days? The lady, with a look of helplessness, replied, Whenever my son and daughter-in-law quarrel with each other, my daughter-in-law always asks my son, If your mom and I fall into water, whom will you save first? And because I do not want to put my son in a difficult position, I am learning to swim. A few days later, husband and wife were quarreling again, and the daughter-in-law unreasonably asked, Now tell me, if your mom and I fall into water, whom will you save first? Husband replied, I don't have to get into the water. My mom knows to swim. She will save you. Wife refused to relent. No, you have to jump into the water and have to save one of us. Whom will you save? Husband replied, Then you will surely die, because I don't know to swim, and my mom will definitely save me first. One day in math class, Johnny's teacher wanted to test his basic arithmetic skills. Johnny, the teacher said, let's say I gave you 20 eggs. Johnny interrupted, But you didn't give me any eggs. The teacher, getting a little frustrated, replied, Just pretend I gave them to you. What do you lose by imagining? Johnny nodded. Okay, fine. The teacher continued, Now, if you gave me back 5 eggs, how many would you have left? Without hesitation, Johnny grinned and said, 100 eggs. The teacher, now angry and confused, asked, How on earth do you have 100 eggs? With a cheeky smile, Johnny replied, You just imagine giving me 20 eggs, right? So why can't I imagine having 100 eggs? What do you lose by imagining? 2 shrimp were swimming around in the sea one day. The first one was called Justin, and the second one was called Christian. They were continually being chased and threatened by the sharks that inhabited the area. Eventually, Justin had had enough. He said to Christian, I'm fed up with being a prawn. I wish I was a shark, and then I wouldn't have to worry about being eaten all the time. As he said this, a large, mysterious cod appeared and said, Your wish is granted. And believe it or not, with that, Justin turned into a fearsome shark. Christian was horrified and so immediately swam away, as he was scared of being eaten by his old friend. As time went by, Justin found his new life as a shark to be boring and lonely. None of his old friends would let him get near them as they thought he would eat them, and so they just swam away whenever he approached. It took a while, but eventually Justin realized that his new menacing appearance was the cause of his sad plight. Then one day he was swimming all alone as usual when he saw the mysterious cod again. He thought it'd be better if he could go back to his old life, so he swam to the cod and begged to be changed back. The cod worked his magic, and suddenly Justin was a prawn once more. With tears of joy streaming down his cheeks, Justin swam straight to Christian's home. As he opened the coral gate, the happy memories came flooding back. He banged on the door and shouted, Christian, it's me, Justin, your old friend. Come out and see me again. Christian replied, No way. You're a shark now and you'll just eat me. I'm not being tricked into being your dinner. Justin shouted back, No, I'm not a shark anymore. That was the old me. I've changed. I've found code. I'm a prawn again, Christian. Joe and Jim were at the lake. Joe said, Let's have a swimming contest. Jim said, No way. You know you'll win. You're twice as fast as me. Joe said, Well, how about if you take the canoe across while I swim? Will you race then? Okay, we can do that, Jim said, and across the lake they went. Joe was freestyle swimming, and Jim was rowing in the canoe. But about halfway across, Joe realized the water was only about 2 feet deep. It didn't make sense for him to swim, so he began walking with his knees bent the rest of the way across, just his head out of the water. Jim was still right beside him in the canoe. Just then, an officer with the Department of Natural Resources came roaring up beside them, his blue lights flashing. Jim and Joe both stopped. "Is there a problem, officer?" Joe asked. "You better believe there is," the officer said. "You boys can't be having a race where one of you is rowing a canoe and the other is walking in the water." "Why not?" said Jim. "Didn't you hear?" the officer replied. "Roe versus Wade is no longer legal." John and David were both patients in a mental hospital. One day while they were walking, they passed the hospital swimming pool, and John suddenly dove into the deep end. He sank to the bottom and stayed there. David promptly jumped in and saved him, swimming to the bottom of the pool and pulling John out. The medical director came to know of David's heroic act. He immediately ordered that David be discharged from the hospital, as he now considered him to be okay. The doctor said, "David, we have good news and bad news for you. The good news is that we are going to discharge you because you have regained your sanity. Since you were able to jump in and save another patient, you must be mentally stable. The bad news is that the patient that you saved hung himself in the bathroom and died after all." David replied, "Doctor, John didn't hang himself. I hung him there to dry." 2 men were washed ashore during World War I. Their ship, an aging mine-sweeping model, had wrecked off the coast of an uninhabited island. As the older veteran worked to build a makeshift camp, the younger soldier managed to salvage a radio and quickly telegraph an SOS with their coordinates. To their surprise, a ship responded within the hour, confirming that it could arrive at their position in approximately 2 weeks. The old vet sighed and shook his head, saying he'd rather take his chances swimming out to the wrecked ship and trying to repair it. The young soldier scoffed. "You'd really rather play with that old Minecraft all day?" The older man shrugged. "It's better than a fortnight." A man was away on a business trip and decided to call his wife and let her know I had arrived safely. A little girl picks up the phone. "Hello? Hi, honey. This is Daddy. Is Mommy near the phone?" Daddy asks. "No, Daddy." She's upstairs in the bedroom with Uncle Paul. After a brief pause, Daddy says, "But honey, you haven't got an Uncle Paul." "Oh, yes, I do, and he's upstairs in the room with Mommy right now." Dad takes a second to process this, then speaks. Okay, then this is what I want you to do. Put the phone down on the table. Run upstairs, knock on the bedroom door, and shout to Mommy that Daddy's car just pulled into the driveway." A few minutes later, the little girl comes back to the phone. "I did it, Daddy." "And what happened, honey?" he asked. "Well, Mommy got all scared, jumped out of bed with no clothes on, and ran around screaming. Then she tripped over the rug, hit her head on the dresser, and now she isn't moving at all." "Oh my God, what about Uncle Paul?" "He jumped out of the bed with no clothes on, too. He was all scared, and he jumped out of the back window and into the swimming pool. But I guess he didn't know that you took out the water last week to clean it. He hit the bottom of the pool, and I think he's dead." A long, silent pause. Then Daddy says, "Swimming pool? Is this 4186819? Early one morning, little Johnny sat at the breakfast table, his face scrunched up in deep thought. His dad, noticing the unusual silence, asked, "What's on your mind, Johnny?" Johnny looked up, his curiosity clearly getting the better of him. "Dad, how many legs does a heart have?" His dad chuckled at the odd question, ruffling Johnny's hair. "A heart doesn't have any legs, son. But where did you get that idea?" Johnny hesitated, his eyes darting around as if searching for the right words. "Well," he began slowly, "last night I heard you say, 'Sweetheart, Put your legs up. One sunny afternoon in a bustling household, the maid approached her employer with an unusual request. She held out a shirt, neatly folded, with a hint of hesitation in her voice. "Madam, please, could you take this shirt back?" Surprised, the lady of the house looked at her with curiosity. "Why didn't you like it? It's one of my favorites," she replied, raising an eyebrow. The maid, trying to suppress a smile, responded, "Oh, no, madam. The shirt is absolutely gorgeous. It's just that, well, there's a small issue." The lady leaned in, intrigued. "Whenever I wear it, something odd happens. The boss doesn't seem to notice me at all. It's as if I'm invisible. He completely ignores me, thinking I'm you, just going about my work." The lady chuckled. "That doesn't seem so bad." The maid sighed, continuing, "But that's not all. The driver, well, let's just say he's gotten a bit too comfortable. Every time I'm wearing it, he always sneaks up from behind and lies down, thinking it's you." A large ship set out on a journey, carrying 300 passengers, all of whom were mental patients. The voyage started smoothly, with clear skies and calm seas, but as they ventured into the middle of the ocean, disaster struck. The ship's engine broke down. Panic spread among the crew as they scrambled to figure out what to do. Meanwhile, the passengers noticed the commotion and, in their own way, decided to help. One of them suddenly shouted, "The ship's stuck! Let's all get out and push it!" The mental asylum was getting full, and they had to discharge some patients. The psychiatrist devised a simple test to see which patients had recovered enough to return to society. He assembled all patients and drew a door on a chalkboard. He then announced that whoever was able to open that door would be released from the asylum. Chaos broke out. The patients began running and fighting to be first to the chalkboard. They began to push, kick, scratch, and even bite the door. Disappointed, the psychiatrist was about to give up when he saw a patient calmly standing next to the wall. Hopefully, he approached the patient and asked him, "Why aren't you rushing to the door?" The patient replied, "I'm not so mad as the rest to rush to it. There's no way they can open it." The psychiatrist asked him, "Why's that?" The patient replied, "I have the key." A young lady was enjoying a sunny day at the beach, confidently strolling along in her bikini. As she relaxed on her towel, she couldn't help but notice an old man nearby staring at her intently. Feeling uncomfortable, she decided to move to a different spot. But to her annoyance, she soon realized the old man had followed her, still staring. Frustrated, she decided to take action and filed a complaint. The case went to court, and the judge asked the old man, "Sir, why were you staring at this young woman?" The old man, without missing a beat, responded, "Your Honor, I was just being polite. I only looked at the parts she had covered." An American lawyer invited a Czechoslovakian friend to stay with him in his mountain cabin. Early in the morning, the lawyer and his Czechoslovakian friend went out to pick berries for their morning breakfast. As they were picking blueberries, along came two big bears, a male and a female. The lawyer, seeing the two bears, climbed a tree. His friend wasn't so lucky, and the male bear caught him and swallowed him whole. The lawyer drove his car to town as fast as he could to get a policeman. The policeman took his gun and ran to the berry patch with the lawyer. Sure enough, the two bears were still there. "He's in that one," said the lawyer, pointing to the male. The policeman looked at the bears, took careful aim with his gun, and shot the female. "What did you do that for?" shouted the lawyer. "I said he was in the other bear." "Exactly," answered the policeman. "Would you believe a lawyer who told you that the check was in the mail? A man wanted to become a monk, so he went to the monastery and talked to the head monk. The head monk said, 'You must take a vow of silence and can only say 2 words every 3 years. The man agreed, and after the first 3 years, the head monk came to him and said, "What are your 2 words?" "Food cold," the man replied. 3 more years went by, and the head monk came to him and said, "What are your 2 words?" "Robe dirty!" the man exclaimed. 3 more years went by, and the head monk came to him and said, "What are your 2 words?" "I quit," said the man. Well, the head monk replied, "I am not surprised. You have done nothing but complain ever since you got here."
If you're still here, I'm thrilled you enjoyed the joke. Subscribing is a simple way to stay connected. Join our community and make me a happy friend.